Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to Stately Vaughn Manor, where Roger and I have returned. Because it's Wednesday, that means it's Epic Comic Book Wednesday. Every Wednesday, we'll talk about a certain comic book, graphic novel, or comic book subject. Steve Donoghue over on his channel will talk about the same comic book, graphic novel, or comic book subject. It is our world's finest team up that we do once a week. And this week, we're talking about a Marvel Comics character who has been surprisingly durable. This character has been around for years and years, since 1964, and has been in the Avengers for decades. And we are talking about Hawkeye, the mighty Hawkeye, who is more than just a second-rate Green Arrow ripoff, right? Right, he's more than that. He's got attitude, Hawkeye. And he managed to survive his first appearance where he came off as, well, kind of an idiot. And that is the story we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about Hawkeye's first adventure, Hawkeye the Marksman, which took place in an Iron Man issue. And Hawkeye was the villain. That's right, Hawkeye began his career as a villain. He didn't really seem to intend to be a villain, but he became a villain out of sheer stupidity, and we're going to be talking about that. And this is a story you can find in the first Iron Man epic collection, but this is the first Hawkeye epic collection, volume 1, which has stories from 1964 all the way through 1988. And that is because Hawkeye didn't have a regular comic book for years and years. He would just show up in other comic books. He had a limited series here and there. And even when he did get a comic book, it didn't always last a heck of a long time. So he showed up all over the place, but mainly he was in the Avengers. And he's been a very sturdy Avenger who's been there for, like I said, decades. But his first appearance was interesting. So let's talk about Hawkeye's first adventure, Hawkeye the Marksman, which took place in an issue of Tales of Suspense. Tales of Suspense, issue number 57, featuring the power of Iron Man. And you could tell Marvel was very proud of Hawkeye, their creation of Hawkeye, because he's all over the cover. And as they say, we think Hawkeye is so terrific, we plastered him all over our cover. And these are the issues that were written by Stan Lee and drawn by Don Heck. I love Don Heck's Iron Man. It has such a sense of the 1960s. I really enjoy that series of comics. Very much of its time, Don Heck's Iron Man. And we begin our story in the most dangerous place on Earth, Tony Stark's weapons factory. So Tony Stark's weapons factory in the early 1960s was not a place you wanted to work because it was incredibly dangerous. There were villains attacking it every other day. Literally, every other day there's a new villain attacking, destroying half the factory, it seems like. And you think Tony Stark would come up with some pretty strong safety measures, but all he did was run around as Iron Man fighting villains in his factory, destroying the place. But today, in this first issue, that Hawkeye appeared, the villain in Iron Man's factory is actually Tony Stark, because this place is dangerous even without supervillains, as we could see from this first splash page here, where Iron Man is saving this worker from disaster. In the huge weapons factory of wealthy Tony Stark, a vat of molten steel accidentally tips towards a workman below when Iron Man's Stark's personal bodyguard leaps to the rescue. And only we know that Iron Man and Stark are one and the same. So a vat of molten steel somehow just tips over and nearly kills this guy. What's going on in Iron Man's factory anyway? And Iron Man's just like, look out, fella, you're not allowed to take hot showers on company time. Okay. So, and the workman's just like, thanks, Iron Man, for saving my life from this inexplicable accident that just happened where I was nearly destroyed by molten steel. So, yeah, Iron Man's factory, very dangerous place. So Iron Man saves this guy, doesn't give this accident a second thought, doesn't care, you know, he saved the guy. What would happen if he wasn't around? I mean, he would just been like, oh man, oh, that's too bad. So Iron Man doesn't give it another thought. He's just all super concerned over his personal business. And his personal business involves him being in love with Pepper Potts. But he cannot ever tell Pepper Potts, his secretary, that he's in love with her because he could die at any time. This is a point in Iron Man's career where he has to wear his chest plate always. He has to always wear it under his shirt, just like I do. You know, my Iron Man chest plate is under here. You can't tell though. And the same with Iron Man. He always wore this chest plate to keep his heart beating because there was a little piece of shrapnel in there that was inoperable at this time, I guess. And only his chest plate prevented it from killing him. But at any moment, it could. And at any moment, Tony Stark could die. This is the tragedy of Iron Man and these early Iron Man issues. He never knew, when he would just die. And so he just ran around having adventures and refused to allow himself any kind of personal life. But at this point, he's tempted. And he sort of accidentally asks Pepper out on a date, which makes Happy Hogan very unhappy because Happy Hogan is also in love with Pepper Potts because we have our whole love triangle here. And so Tony Stark says, okay, let's go out, but we'll go to the most unromantic place I could think of. We'll go to the circus. So actually they go to the Midway at Coney Island. That's where they go. And so they're at the Midway at Coney Island, and here we find Hawkeye. This is our first view of Hawkeye. He works there as just a performer. And he is the greatest marksman of all time, and he works at Coney Island. And there's a ride here which must have been invented by Tony Stark because it automatically it just goes wrong and it starts to break. And the flying pinwheel apparently is what it's called. It goes out of control. The gears start to shatter and Tony Stark has to become Iron Man to save the day, and so he does. And Iron Man saves the day as Iron Man saves all the people from the ride that's about to kill everyone. And Hawkeye watches this and he becomes very jealous. He's like, who's this Iron Man guy? I could do better. I could shoot arrows real good. Clearly I'm as cool as Iron Man. So he decides he's going to become a superhero. And all he needs is weapons and an outfit. So he makes up some fancy arrows because he read the Green Arrow comic book, so he decides that's what he's going to do. And he gets a legitimately awesome costume. His costume is really, really cool. So if nothing else, Hawkeye looks cool. And Hawkeye decides to go out and test some of his arrows. And he decides to test an arrow that, could take him up to the top of this building, which it does. And as he's up there, he sees a jewel robbery and he says, hey, this is a perfect time to prove what a great superhero I could be by capturing this robber. And so he makes a perfect shot, but he doesn't want to hurt the guy, so he just gets his coat. And the guy manages to slither away. And so Hawkeye doesn't actually catch the burglar because, at this point he kind of sucks as a superhero. But he goes down to check out what was stolen, and he's looking at these jewels when the police show up and automatically assume that he must have stolen these jewels. And they say, don't move, we've caught your partner and we've got you dead to rights. So they already caught the other guy, right? And Hawkeye decides, uh-oh, they'll never believe I'm innocent. I'll have to run for it. And so he runs. So this is Hawkeye's first dumb thing that he does, if you think about it. The other guy has already been caught. Any physical evidence in the place, it's going to be the other guy. I mean, he's not wearing gloves. His fingerprints are all going to be all over everything. Hawkeye could just tell his story honestly and said, hey, you know, I'm dressed like this because I'm a performer over at Coney Island. I'm a marksman. I was over here testing this new arrow, which he was. I saw this guy, you know, break out of the jewelry store. I tried to stop him. There's the arrow over there and a bit of his coat. And he could just tell his story honestly and he would get off, right? Instead, he runs. He just runs, making himself look pretty guilty. And who does he run into but this mysterious woman who comes and picks him up? And this is none other than the Black Widow. It's the Black Widow. And Hawkeye, who behaves as if he's 15 years old, is just immediately in love with Black Widow because she's hot. He just can't handle the hotness. And so Hawkeye immediately is just in love. And nothing else matters except doing whatever Black Widow tells him to do. And she takes him back to her place, which is full of all of these gadgets and things. And she's like, you know, this equipment belongs to one I rent the home from. But there are things here which will increase your own powers. So Hawkeye's like, awesome, I could use all these scientific weapons that are just here for some reason, and I could make myself more powerful. And then she says, but what's the angle, beautiful? Do you have any dragons you want slain or what? And she says, in a way, yes. The famous Iron Man is a mortal enemy of mine. Any man who could defeat him would be a man I could learn to love. Hawkeye doesn't even care why Iron Man would be her adversary, right? Now, Iron Man is known as a superhero who fights supervillains. So clearly she's kind of shady if she's wanting Iron Man to be defeated, right? But he doesn't care. He doesn't care. He doesn't give it a second thought. And this is where Hawkeye legitimately slips into villainy and becomes a villain. Which, you know, is not something we think of now so often. But yeah, he began his career as a dopey villain who is just doing whatever, you know, the Black Widow wanted him to do. Which is to go fight Tony Stark. So he got a bunch of his arrows. He went to Tony Stark's factory, and he decides to be the next villain to attack the factory. Because this place, like I said, the most dangerous place around in the 1960s. So he breaks in, and he does it, you know, as loud as he can to attract Iron Man's attention. Iron Man shows up. He gets out his special arrows and shoots at Iron Man. And what, says Iron Man? I'm being attacked with arrows. How can anyone stop me with a mere, wait a minute, there's some sort of chemical on the suction tips. It has a rusting action. My armor is stiffening. It's getting harder to move. And so his iron is just being rusted by the strange substance on the tip of these arrows. I'm assuming these arrows must have come from the Black Widow. And Iron Man has to actually take off his Iron Man outfit before he's, you know, rusted solid, I guess. And he leaves bits of his Iron Man suit around, and our man Clint Barton, Hawkeye, says, hey, I could use this stuff, and starts stealing his Iron Man suit. But Tony Stark is clever, and when he's not endangering his workers, he leaves extra Iron Man suits around the factory. And he picked up one of these and goes after Hawkeye, who's, you know, driving away. He's trying to get away. He figures, I beat him. But he uses his repulsor on the car and then goes down to tackle Hawkeye. Now, Hawkeye shoots him with an arrow that, tangles him up with a bunch of ropes. But that doesn't matter to Iron Man because he's Iron Man. You can't stop Iron Man with ropes. And so he destroys the dock that Hawkeye is standing on because personal property means nothing to Iron Man. And not very dignified, but here is Hawkeye clinging to this post, which Iron Man bends back and slaps him into the water. And he figures, I got him. And so he pulls him out of the water. Hawkeye is just a mess. And the Black Widow, excuse my dog over there, itching himself. You okay over there, Zorro? Yeah. He pulls Hawkeye out of the water. Black Widow is watching him and saying, man, I sure did choose a loser here. But Hawkeye is not actually unconscious. He wakes up and he decides, being a sneaky supervillain, at this point that's what he is, he decides to shoot Iron Man in the back with one of his arrows. And so he does. And it's a big demolition blast arrow. And he shoots him and it kind of bounces off Iron Man's shoulder. And the blast hits the Black Widow. And what does dumb Hawkeye say? You! What have you done? What have you done, Iron Man? What have you done? He's the one who shoots Iron Man in the back, and it deflects off Iron Man and hits the Black Widow, and he's blaming Iron Man because, he's just an ass at this point in his career. But nothing matters other than Black Widow because he's just in love with Black Widow. So he picks her up and he rushes off, and he manages to get away in the fog so that we can have further adventures with Hawkeye as a villain. And we do. He does come back and attacks Iron Man again. Still looking awesome. And it takes a while for Hawkeye to actually become a hero, but eventually he does. He gets hired on as a replacement Avenger of all things by Captain America, and that began his long Avengers career where he turns things around, stops being such a sucker for the Black Widow, and becomes a hero. But it's interesting to watch him bumbling his way through this story as a villain. It's kind of fun. I get the feeling that Marvel wanted to do more with his character. Stan Lee wanted to do more with his character because he looked great, which is one of the most important things. And he sort of accidentally fell into villainy. He is definitely a rogue, right? But his heart was never into being a villain. He was just in love with who at the time was a villain, Black Widow. And he has the maturity level of a 15-year-old. So, there you go. But it was a fun first adventure of Hawkeye. And there you go. The first adventure of Hawkeye. Wasn't that great? Roger was thrilled. Okay, guys, I will catch you next time.